The text message arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right in the middle of my monthly budget review for the hospital network. "You're suffocating me with your control. I need more space." No context. No explanation. Just Brielle's digital declaration of independence, delivered with the same casual cruelty she used to cancel dinner reservations. I stared at my phone screen, watching the cursor blink in the empty reply field. Suffocating her? I'm Tyler Morgan, procurement director for Maine Regional Medical, and my biggest crime this week was asking why our joint credit card showed 3 charges at that overpriced boutique downtown. Pretty sure I'm only suffocating the joint checking account, but what do I know? The irony wasn't lost on me. Brielle Morgan, head of influencer partnerships for Active Life Sportswear, needed space from the guy who spent 12 hours a day negotiating medical supply contracts while she posed with yoga mats for Instagram. My office cubicle was 8 by 10 feet. Her corner office had a view of the harbor and a coffee machine that cost more than my monthly car payment. I set the phone aside and returned to reviewing vendor invoices. Numbers don't lie, unlike spouses. The catheter order from Med Supply Plus was 15% over last quarter's pricing. I made a note to call their rep tomorrow and negotiate better terms. At least someone in my life would have to justify their expenses. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification that Brielle had posted a new Instagram story. I watched her twirl in front of a mirror at some upscale gym, wearing leggings that probably cost more than a hospital orderly's daily wage. The caption read, "Finding my authentic self through movement and mindfulness. Sometimes growth requires difficult conversations." Self-care. Boundaries. Growth. Difficult conversations. Right. Because texting your husband of 6 years that he's suffocating you while he's at work definitely qualifies as meaningful dialogue. I screenshotted the post, not sure why. Maybe I was already documenting the end of something I'd stopped fighting for months ago. Vera Thompson knocked on my cubicle wall. "Tyler, you look like someone just told you the coffee machine's broken again. Worse, marriage machine's on the fritz." Vera, my closest friend in the hospital administration, raised an eyebrow. At 52, she'd survived 2 divorces and had the wisdom of someone who'd learned to spot relationship red flags from orbit. "Brielle again? She needs space. Apparently I'm controlling. You? The guy who can't even control which brand of pens the hospital orders because you have to run it past 3 committees?" Vera laughed, but her eyes showed concern. "What brought this on?" I showed her the text. Vera read it twice, then handed my phone back with the expression she usually reserved for reviewing particularly inflated pharmaceutical invoices. "Tyler, honey, when someone says they need space, they usually mean they need space to do something they can't do while you're watching." The observation hit like a diagnosis I'd been avoiding. Brielle had been working late more often, staying out with the girls until midnight, and treating our conversations like mandatory compliance meetings. When I'd asked about her schedule, she'd accused me of being possessive. When I'd stopped asking, she'd complained I didn't care about her life. "You think she's seeing someone?" "I think she's setting up the narrative for whatever comes next. That text isn't about space, Tyler. It's about blame. She's making you the bad guy so she can be the victim." I considered this while watching Brielle's Instagram story replay automatically. The gym she was at wasn't the one near our house. I recognized the logo on the wall. It was downtown, near the Active Life offices, but her workday should have ended hours ago. My phone buzzed with another text from Brielle. "Don't wait up, team dinner ran late. We'll probably crash at Quinn's place." Quinn was Brielle's colleague and closest friend, a 28-year-old influencer coordinator who treated every social gathering like content creation. If Brielle was really at a team dinner, Quinn's Instagram would be documenting every appetizer and cocktail. I checked Quinn's profile. Her last post was from this morning, showing her home office setup with the caption, "Grinding from home today. Work from home, productivity." So either Quinn was lying about working from home, or Brielle was lying about the team dinner. Given the pattern of the past few months, I was betting on option 2. Vera, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to document suspicious behavior in a marriage, what would you recommend? Hypothetically, I'd recommend getting very good at taking screenshots and keeping detailed records. Hypothetically, I'd also recommend talking to a lawyer before confronting anyone about anything. She paused. And Tyler? Hypothetically, I'd recommend doing all of this quietly. If someone's planning to make you the villain, don't give them ammunition. That evening, I arrived home to our condo in the suburbs to find Brielle's car gone and a note on the kitchen counter. Staying at Quinn's tonight. Need to think. Don't text me. Don't text me. After 6 years of marriage, my wife was treating me like an overeager first date. I opened our laptop and began doing what any reasonable procurement professional would do when faced with suspicious vendor behavior. I started an audit. Our phone record showed 17 calls between Brielle and an unknown number in the past 2 weeks. The credit card statements revealed charges at restaurants I'd never been to, on dates when Brielle claimed to be working late. Most interesting was a hotel charge from last weekend, when she'd supposedly been at a work conference in Boston. The charge was local. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later. Right now, I felt the same cold clarity I experienced when reviewing a vendor's inflated invoice. Someone was trying to cheat me, and I was very good at catching cheaters. The week that followed Brielle's space declaration was a masterclass in gaslighting. She came home Wednesday night acting as if nothing had happened, chatting about her day while I made dinner. When I mentioned her text, she waved it off as just stress talking and changed the subject to her upcoming project with some fitness influencer named Lance. Lance Garrison, I learned from Brielle's enthusiastic description, was a brand photographer who specialized in athletic lifestyle content. He was helping Active Life launch a new campaign featuring authentic couples in real relationship moments. The irony was thick enough to require medical intervention. He's so creative, Tyler. He really gets the vision of showing genuine intimacy through movement and shared experiences. Brielle scrolled through Lance's Instagram portfolio while we ate. Look at this shot he did for that supplement company. See how natural and connected the couple looks? I glanced at the photo of 2 impossibly attractive people laughing while sharing a protein shake on a beach. Very authentic. I'm sure that's exactly how real couples consume nutritional supplements. You don't have to be sarcastic about everything, Tyler. This is important for my career. I'm not being sarcastic about your career. I'm being sarcastic about the idea that staged photos represent genuine anything. Brielle set down her fork with the dramatic flair she usually reserved for her Instagram stories. This is exactly what I meant about the control thing. You dismiss everything I care about. I'm not dismissing your work. I'm questioning the premise that hiring models to pretend they're in love sells more yoga pants. They're not models, Tyler. They're real couples. Lance specifically works with authentic relationships because the chemistry shows in the photos. Something about the way she said Lance's name, with just a hint more enthusiasm than professional interest warranted, made me pay closer attention. I pulled out my phone and looked up his Instagram profile, while Brielle continued explaining the artistic merits of commercialized intimacy. Lance Garrison was exactly what central casting would order for generic, attractive photographer. 33, according to his bio, with the kind of carefully maintained stubble that suggested he spent more on grooming than most people spent on groceries. His feed was a carefully curated mix of professional work and personal lifestyle shots. Lance hiking scenic trails, Lance preparing elaborate meals, Lance working out shirtless because apparently that was relevant to photography. When do you start working with him? I asked. We're having a planning meeting tomorrow night. He wants to scout locations and discuss the creative direction. At the office? No, he suggested meeting somewhere more relaxed so we can really dive deep into the concept. There's this new wine bar downtown that has great lighting for showing portfolio work. A planning meeting at a wine bar. How professional. I made a mental note to check our credit card statements tomorrow night to see if Brielle's work meeting generated any interesting charges. The rest of the week followed a predictable pattern. Brielle stayed out late Wednesday for the planning meeting, came home Thursday talking about how inspiring Lance's creative process was, and spent Friday evening texting constantly during dinner. When I asked who she was messaging, she said it was work stuff and accused me of being paranoid. Saturday morning, I woke up to find Brielle already dressed and heading out the door. "Where are you going?" "Lance wants to do some test shots today. We're scouting that park by the river for natural lighting." "It's supposed to rain." "That's why it's just scouting, Tyler. We're not actually shooting today." She was gone before I could point out that scouting locations didn't typically require the full makeup and hair routine she'd clearly completed before I woke up. I spent the morning catching up on work emails and the afternoon doing something I'd never thought I'd do. I drove to Riverside Park. Brielle's car was there, parked next to a black SUV with photography equipment visible in the back. I found them on the walking trail near the river, Brielle laughing at something Lance was saying while he gestured animatedly with his hands. They were standing closer than professional collaboration typically required, and Lance's hand was resting on Brielle's lower back in a way that seemed more intimate than instructional. I watched from a distance for 10 minutes, feeling like a private investigator in my own marriage. They weren't doing anything explicitly inappropriate, but their body language told a story that had nothing to do with professional photography and everything to do with personal chemistry. I left before they could see me, but I'd seen enough to confirm what Vera had suspected. Brielle wasn't just working late. She was working on an exit strategy. Sunday evening, she dropped the anniversary bomb. "Tyler, I can't believe you forgot our anniversary is next weekend." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing the quarterly budget reports. "I didn't forget. It's the 15th. And what have you planned? I thought we'd figure it out together. What did you have in mind?" Brielle's expression shifted to the particular brand of disappointed martyrdom she'd perfected over the past year. "I shouldn't have to plan my own anniversary celebration, Tyler. The fact that you're asking me what I want, instead of showing that you've thought about what would make me happy, just proves my point about how disconnected we've become." "What point?" "You told me you needed space. I was giving you space." "Space doesn't mean you stop caring about our relationship. It means you care enough to work on yourself so we can be better together." The logic was dizzying. I needed to work on myself so we could be better together, but I also needed to plan elaborate romantic gestures while giving her space to have wine meetings with photographers who touched her back like they were already intimate. "What kind of celebration did you want?" "Something special. Somewhere nice. Maybe that new restaurant downtown with the private dining rooms. Something that shows you still care about us." The new restaurant downtown was called Meridian, and I happened to know it was expensive enough to require a second mortgage for the private dining rooms. I also knew it was 3 blocks from Lance's photography studio, according to his Instagram location tags. "I'll make a reservation." "Thank you. And Tyler, maybe put some thought into making it special. We only get one 6-year anniversary." The irony was that she was right. We would only get one 6-year anniversary, but probably not for the reasons she was thinking. That night, after Brielle fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen with our laptop and began what I was starting to think of as due diligence. If Brielle was planning to end our marriage, I wanted to understand the terms before she presented them. Monday morning brought a revelation that confirmed my growing suspicions. While Brielle showered, her phone buzzed with a text message. The preview on the lock screen was enough to make everything clear. "Can't wait for tonight. Same place. L. Lance. Same place. Tonight." I took a photo of the message with my phone, then went to work with the grim satisfaction of someone who'd just solved a particularly complex procurement puzzle. The vendor was definitely overcharging, and now I had documentation. At the hospital, I threw myself into my regular duties while mentally preparing for the conversation I knew was coming. Vera found me during lunch, reviewing medical supply contracts with unusual intensity. "Tyler, you look like you're planning to audit someone's entire existence." "Close. I'm planning to audit my marriage." I showed her the photo of Lance's text. Vera studied it with the same attention she gave to suspicious pharmaceutical invoices. "Well, that's about as subtle as a heart attack in the emergency room." She handed my phone back. "What's your plan?" "Document everything, separate our finances quietly, talk to a lawyer, and plan the most memorable anniversary dinner of Brielle's life." That sounds ominous. It should. That afternoon, I made 3 important phone calls. First, to Meridian Restaurant, where I reserved the most expensive private dining room for the following Saturday. Second, to my bank, where I opened a new checking account and arranged to redirect my direct deposit. Third, to David Chen, a family law attorney Vera had recommended after her second divorce. David's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind of place that charged enough to afford historical charm. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd heard every possible variation of marital disaster. "Tyler, I've reviewed the information you sent over. The good news is that your prenup is very clear about asset division in case of adultery. The bad news is that proving adultery requires more than suspicious text messages and restaurant charges. What would constitute proof? Photos, video, witness testimony, or a confession, preferably documented." David leaned back in his chair. "The question is whether you want to go that route or whether you'd prefer a no-fault divorce that's quicker and less contentious. I want her to understand that actions have consequences." "Understood. But Tyler, revenge is expensive, both financially and emotionally. Sometimes the best revenge is moving on quickly and cleanly." I appreciated David's perspective, but he didn't understand the situation completely. This wasn't just about Brielle cheating. It was about 6 years of increasingly manipulative behavior, financial irresponsibility, and emotional abuse disguised as relationship growth. She'd spent months making me feel like the villain in our marriage while planning her exit strategy with a photographer who specialized in authentic relationships. "I'll think about it. In the meantime, what can I do to protect myself financially?" "Everything you're already doing. Separate accounts, document all shared expenses, and don't do anything that could be construed as abandonment or financial abuse. Keep paying your share of the household expenses until the separation is official." That evening, I came home to find Brielle getting ready for another work meeting. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something black and elegant that definitely wasn't purchased with team planning sessions in mind. "Another late meeting?" "Lance wants to finalize the location list and review some of his previous work. It's important that I understand his artistic vision before we start shooting." "Of course. Will Quinn be there?" Brielle paused in applying lipstick, meeting my eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Quinn? No, why would Quinn be there? This is about photography, not social media coordination." "Just wondering. You've been spending a lot of time on this project." "It's a big opportunity for me, Tyler. Lance has connections with major brands. If this campaign goes well, it could open doors for bigger partnerships." "I'm sure it could." After Brielle left, I did something I'd never imagined myself doing. I followed her, not closely and not with any dramatic spy movie techniques. I simply drove downtown and parked where I could see the entrance to the wine bar she'd mentioned. Brielle arrived first, at exactly 7:30. Lance showed up 10 minutes later, carrying what looked like a portfolio case. They greeted each other with a hug that lasted longer than professional courtesy required, and Lance's hand lingered on Brielle's waist as they walked into the restaurant. I waited in my car for 2 hours, feeling pathetic and justified in equal measure. When they emerged, the portfolio case was nowhere to be seen, but Lance was carrying a small gift bag. They stood outside the restaurant talking for another 15 minutes, and when Lance leaned down to kiss Brielle goodbye, it definitely wasn't the kind of kiss exchanged between professional colleagues. I drove home and was in bed, pretending to sleep, when Brielle returned at 11:30. She slipped into the bathroom to change clothes, and I heard her phone buzz with a text message. She typed a response quickly, then deleted the conversation thread before plugging the phone in to charge. The next morning, while Brielle was at her morning yoga class, I checked our credit card statement online. The charge from Meridian Wine Bar was there: 2 appetizers, 2 entrees, 3 bottles of wine, and dessert. Total, $247 for a work meeting. But the more interesting charge was from Tiffany & Co., posted yesterday afternoon, $340. I checked the timing against Brielle's work calendar, which she kept synced to our shared Google account. The purchase was made during her lunch break, between meetings. Lance's gift bag suddenly made sense. I took screenshots of everything, then called David Chen's office to schedule another appointment. If Brielle wanted to play games with our marriage, she was about to learn that I was very good at keeping score. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that makes Maine postcards look authentic. I spent the morning reviewing my plan while Brielle got ready for our anniversary dinner. She'd chosen a new outfit for the occasion, something elegant and expensive that I was certain Lance had influenced, if not purchased outright. "You look beautiful," I told her as we prepared to leave. It wasn't a lie. Brielle had always been stunning, which made her betrayal feel more personal somehow. Beautiful people have options, and she'd clearly decided I wasn't one of them. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." She straightened my tie with the kind of casual intimacy that would have meant something a month ago. Now it felt like performance art. The drive to Meridian was quiet, filled with the kind of polite conversation that strangers make in elevators. Brielle commented on the restaurant's reputation. I agreed it was supposed to be excellent, and we both pretended this was a normal anniversary dinner instead of what I suspected would be our last meal as a married couple. Meridian lived up to its expensive reputation. The private dining room I'd reserved was elegantly appointed with soft lighting, fresh flowers, and a view of the harbor. The kind of romantic setting that would have been perfect for celebrating 6 years of marriage if we'd actually had 6 years worth celebrating. "Tyler, this is beautiful. Thank you for putting thought into this." "You're welcome. I wanted tonight to be memorable." We ordered wine and appetizers, and for the first 20 minutes it almost felt like we were a normal couple having a normal anniversary dinner. Brielle told me about her work projects. I shared some hospital stories, and we managed to avoid any mention of space, control, or Lance Garrison. Then Brielle's phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, then flipped it face down on the table. "Sorry, work stuff." "On a Saturday night?" "You know how it is. Creative projects don't follow business hours." The phone buzzed again. This time, Brielle picked it up and typed a quick response before setting it aside with an apologetic smile. "Brielle, it's our anniversary. Can the creative project wait an hour?" "Of course. You're right. I'm sorry." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Let's focus on us tonight." The gesture might have been touching if I hadn't seen her exchange the exact same intimate hand-holding with Lance at the wine bar 3 nights earlier. I squeezed her hand and smiled. "I've been thinking about what you said last week, about needing space and feeling suffocated." Brielle's expression became carefully neutral. "Oh? You were right. I have been controlling. Not intentionally, but I can see how my behavior might have felt restrictive." "Tyler, I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot that you're willing to work on yourself." "I've been working on a lot of things lately, like understanding what you need to be happy." The server arrived with our entrees, giving me a moment to study Brielle's face. She looked relieved, as if I'd just given her permission to continue whatever she'd been planning. The expression reminded me of vendors who thought they'd successfully justified inflated pricing. "What kind of understanding?" she asked after the server left. "Well, I realize I've been too focused on traditional relationship expectations. Things like transparency, shared goals, mutual respect. Old-fashioned concepts that probably feel suffocating to someone with a more modern perspective on marriage. Brielle nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Relationships need room to evolve. People need freedom to grow and explore new connections. New connections. That's an interesting way to put it. I just mean that we shouldn't limit ourselves to outdated models of what marriage looks like. There are so many ways to love and be loved. I took a sip of wine and considered her words. Are you talking about polyamory? Not necessarily, just openness to possibility, the freedom to form meaningful connections without feeling guilty or restricted. Meaningful connections, like the one she'd been forming with Lance over wine and jewelry. I nodded thoughtfully, as if she were presenting a reasonable business proposal instead of asking permission to cheat on our marriage. That's very progressive thinking, Brielle. How long have you been considering this kind of arrangement? It's not about arrangements, Tyler. It's about authentic living, being true to our feelings instead of forcing ourselves into boxes that don't fit anymore. And you feel like our marriage has become a box that doesn't fit? Brielle set down her fork and looked directly at me. I feel like we've grown in different directions. You're focused on stability and routine, and I'm focused on growth and exploration. Those aren't necessarily incompatible, but they require different approaches to commitment. Different approaches to commitment. I had to admire her ability to make infidelity sound like personal development. What would different approaches look like in practice? Maybe we could maintain our emotional connection while allowing space for other relationships. Lots of couples are exploring ethical non-monogamy these days. Ethical non-monogamy, as if there was anything ethical about secretly planning to leave your husband while asking him to pay for anniversary dinners and private dining rooms. Have you already explored this kind of arrangement with someone? Brielle's pause was barely perceptible, but I caught it. I've had conversations about it. Theoretical conversations. With Lance? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Brielle's careful composure slipped for just a moment, long enough for me to see the calculation behind her progressive relationship philosophy. Lance is a colleague, Tyler. We've discussed various approaches to authentic relationships in the context of his photography work. Of course, his specialty in authentic couples must provide interesting insights into modern relationship dynamics. Yes, exactly. He has a very evolved perspective on love and connection. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box, setting it on the table between us. Brielle's eyes lit up with the kind of genuine excitement I hadn't seen from her in months. Tyler, what is this? Open it. She unwrapped the box carefully, revealing a jewelry case from Tiffany & Co. For a moment, she looked confused, then pleased, then confused again as she opened the case to find it empty, except for a small piece of paper. She unfolded the paper and read the printed message. Returned for full refund. Store credit applied to account ending in 4739. Brielle stared at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. I don't understand. Account ending in 4739 is our joint credit card, the same card that shows a $340 purchase at Tiffany on Tuesday afternoon, the same day you had lunch with Lance. The color drained from Brielle's face as she realized what I was saying. Tyler, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explaining things, like how working late requires new dresses, or how professional photography meetings happen at wine bars, or how authentic relationships require secret jewelry purchases. It's not what you think. What I think is that you've been planning to leave me for weeks, possibly months, while making me feel like the problem in our marriage. What I think is that Lance Garrison is more than a colleague, and your interest in ethical non-monogamy is really just interest in having permission to continue an affair you've already started. Brielle looked around the private dining room as if searching for an exit strategy. Tyler, please. Can we discuss this at home? No, Brielle. We're going to discuss it right here, right now. Because this is the last conversation we're going to have as husband and wife. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd collected over the past week. The text messages, the credit card charges, the photos of her with Lance at the park and the wine bar. You wanted space and you're going to get it. I filed for divorce yesterday. David Chen is my attorney, and he's very interested in the documentation I've provided regarding your violation of our prenup's adultery clause. Brielle stared at the phone, then at me, with an expression of complete shock. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself from someone who was clearly planning to destroy our marriage while making me pay for the privilege. Tyler, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can go to counseling. We can figure this out. The only mistake you made was underestimating how good I am at catching people who try to cheat me. And Brielle, I'm very, very good at it. I stood up and placed enough cash on the table to cover dinner and tip. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and give my regards to Lance when you text him from the car. I left Brielle sitting in the private dining room, staring at the empty jewelry box and the evidence of her own deception, while I walked out into the crisp October night, feeling free for the first time in months. The week following our anniversary dinner was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Brielle spent Monday morning crying, Monday afternoon angry, and Monday evening bargaining. She wanted to talk, to explain, to work things out through counseling. I wanted her to move out. Tyler, you're being completely unreasonable. People make mistakes. This doesn't have to end our marriage. You're right that people make mistakes, but what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated decision to have an affair while making me feel guilty for being a controlling husband. We were standing in our kitchen, the same place where she'd left me that note about needing space just 2 weeks earlier. Now she was the one asking for space to explain herself. I never meant for it to go this far with Lance. It just happened. It just happened? You just happened to meet him at wine bars? You just happened to accept expensive jewelry? You just happened to plan a new relationship while asking me to pay for anniversary dinners? Brielle sat down at the kitchen table, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. I was confused about what I wanted. I felt trapped in our marriage, and Lance made me feel alive again. And rather than talking to me about feeling trapped, you decided to have an affair and make me the villain in our marriage. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. You're so logical about everything. I knew you'd want to fix it instead of just understanding how I felt. The comment was revealing in ways she probably didn't intend. She was right that I would have wanted to fix our marriage if she'd told me she was unhappy. Most people would consider that a reasonable response to marital problems. So instead of giving me a chance to understand, you gave Lance a chance to understand. How's that working out for you? Brielle's phone had been suspiciously quiet since Saturday night. No texts from Lance, no calls, no social media interactions. I suspected he'd lost interest once our marriage became complicated instead of convenient. He's not returning my calls. Shocking. It's almost like he was interested in the excitement of an affair, not the reality of a relationship with consequences. Tuesday brought a call from David Chen with an update on the divorce proceedings. Tyler, we received a response from Brielle's attorney. She's claiming emotional abandonment and requesting spousal support. Emotional abandonment? Apparently, you've been distant and controlling, creating an environment that drove her to seek emotional support elsewhere. Her lawyer is painting Lance as a shoulder to cry on, not a romantic relationship. I laughed, which probably wasn't the most professional response to legal strategy. Do they want to see the photos of him kissing her goodbye outside the wine bar? Actually, yes. They're claiming it was a goodbye kiss because she was ending their friendship to focus on saving her marriage. The audacity was impressive. Brielle was rewriting our entire relationship history to make herself the victim of my emotional neglect. According to her narrative, I was a controlling husband who drove her into the arms of a sympathetic friend through years of psychological abuse. David, I have 6 years of text messages, emails, and financial records that show exactly who was controlling whom in this marriage. Do we really need to go to court to prove that? Probably not. But Tyler, this is going to get expensive and ugly if she keeps fighting. Are you sure you don't want to consider a settlement that gives her something to walk away quietly? I thought about Vera's advice regarding revenge being expensive. Then I thought about Brielle's Instagram post from this morning, where she'd shared a quote about surviving narcissistic abuse and finding strength after emotional trauma. She was already telling her story publicly, casting me as the abusive husband and herself as the brave survivor. David, I want to fight this. I want every text message, every credit card charge, and every lie documented in court records. If Brielle wants to play victim, she can explain to a judge why victims typically have affairs with photographers while their abusive husbands pay for anniversary dinners. Understood. I'll prepare for a contested divorce. But Tyler, this means your personal life is going to be very public for the next several months. Good. I'm tired of being the only one in this marriage who cared about honesty. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Quinn Martinez, Brielle's friend and colleague, appeared at my cubicle during lunch looking uncomfortable and overdressed for a hospital visit. Tyler, do you have a minute to talk? Sure, Quinn. What brings you to the exciting world of medical procurement? I wanted to talk to you about Brielle. She's really struggling with everything that's happening. I gestured to the visitor chair next to my desk. I imagine divorce is difficult when you're not the one who initiated it. Quinn sat down and looked around the office with the expression of someone who'd never seen a workplace that didn't have exposed brick and artisanal coffee. She told me what happened at dinner Saturday night. Tyler, I think there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? About her and Lance. Brielle says you think they were having an affair, but she swears it was just a friendship that got a little too close. She never slept with him. I studied Quinn's face, trying to determine if she actually believed what she was saying, or if she was just delivering a message from Brielle. Quinn, did you know Brielle was meeting Lance for dinner and drinks multiple times a week? She mentioned they were working on a project together. Did you know he bought her jewelry? Quinn's pause told me she hadn't known about the jewelry. Tyler, even if their friendship crossed some boundaries, that doesn't mean your marriage has to end. People work through these things all the time. Do they work through lying about it for months while making their spouse feel crazy for asking questions? Brielle says you were monitoring her credit cards and following her around town. That doesn't sound like the behavior of someone who trusts their partner. The conversation was surreal. Quinn was suggesting that my discovery of Brielle's affair was evidence that I was the problem in our marriage. According to this logic, I should have ignored the obvious signs of infidelity and trusted my wife to secretly meet with other men while lying about it. Quinn, I started monitoring our finances when I noticed unexplained charges. I started paying attention to Brielle's schedule when her explanations stopped making sense. If that makes me controlling, then I guess I'm guilty as charged. She's willing to go to counseling, Tyler. She wants to save your marriage. She wants to save her access to our joint assets and avoid the consequences of violating our prenup. Those aren't the same thing as wanting to save our marriage. Quinn left looking frustrated and confused, as if she couldn't understand why I wasn't grateful for Brielle's generous offer to attend therapy for the affair I'd forced her to have through my controlling behavior. That evening, I came home to find Brielle packing boxes in the bedroom. I'm staying at Quinn's place until we figure things out, she announced, without looking up from folding clothes. Good idea. It'll be easier for both of us. Tyler, I know you're angry, but this doesn't have to be permanent. We could separate for a while, work on ourselves individually, and see if we can rebuild something better. Brielle, there's nothing to rebuild. You spent months lying to me while planning to leave me. The only reason you want to work things out now is because Lance disappeared and you're facing the financial consequences of divorce. She stopped packing and turned to face me. That's not true. I love you, Tyler. I made a mistake, but I love you. You love the security I provide. You love having someone to blame for your problems. You love having a safety net while you explore other relationships. But you don't love me. How can you say that? Because someone who loved me wouldn't have spent months making me feel like I was losing my mind while secretly planning to leave me for someone else. Brielle finished packing in silence, and I helped her carry boxes to her car. As she prepared to leave, she turned back with the expression of someone making a final appeal. Tyler, I know I hurt you, but 6 years should count for something. Can't we at least try to end this amicably? Amicably would have been telling me you were unhappy instead of having an affair. Amicably would have been asking for a divorce instead of making me the villain in our marriage. You chose drama over honesty, Brielle. Now you get to live with the consequences. She drove away that night, and I stood in our driveway feeling like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. The house was quiet, clean, and mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months later, I sat in a courthouse conference room watching Brielle's lawyer explain why his client deserved half of everything I'd earned during our marriage, despite the prenup she'd signed and the affair she'd conducted. It was like watching a vendor justify inflated prices with increasingly creative explanations. Your Honor, Mrs. Morgan was driven to seek emotional support outside her marriage due to years of financial control and emotional neglect by her husband. The prenup was signed under duress, and the alleged infidelity was actually a cry for help from a woman trapped in an abusive relationship. David Chen responded with the calm precision of someone presenting an airtight case. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation showing that Mrs. Morgan controlled the majority of household spending, made unilateral financial decisions, and conducted a months-long affair while lying to her husband about her activities. The prenup was reviewed by independent counsel and clearly states that infidelity voids any claim to spousal support or asset division. The judge, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every possible variation of marital disaster, reviewed the evidence with the expression of someone auditing particularly creative accounting. Mr. Morgan, I've reviewed your documentation, text messages, credit card statements, photographs, and witness testimony. Mrs. Morgan, I've reviewed your claims of emotional abuse and financial control. Based on the evidence presented, I find no credible support for claims of abuse or duress. Brielle sat next to her lawyer, looking like someone who'd just realized their vendor relationship was about to be terminated for cause. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. Mrs. Morgan's affair with Mr. Garrison is well documented and constitutes a clear violation of the agreement's fidelity clause. Mrs. Morgan is entitled to her personal belongings and any assets she brought into the marriage. She is not entitled to spousal support, shared assets, or any portion of Mr. Morgan's retirement accounts. The gavel came down like the final signature on a canceled contract. 6 years of marriage dissolved with the efficiency of a well-documented procurement decision. Outside the courthouse, Brielle approached me while David packed up his files. Tyler, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed my life over a mistake. I didn't destroy your life, Brielle. You made choices, and choices have consequences. I just made sure the consequences were proportional to the choices. I'll never forgive you for this. I don't need your forgiveness. I need you to understand that actions matter, and people who lie and cheat don't get to play victim when they're held accountable. She walked away without another word, and I watched her go with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully negotiated a very difficult contract termination. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an interesting piece of information from Vera. Tyler, you'll never guess what I heard about your ex-wife. Surprise me? She's working at a small marketing firm downtown. Apparently, Active Life let her go after some kind of scandal involving inappropriate relationships with vendors. Lance, it turned out, had been more than just Brielle's affair partner. He'd been documenting their relationship for his own purposes, and when Brielle's divorce became public, he'd shared some very intimate photos and videos with friends in the photography community. The images had eventually reached Brielle's employers, who decided that her judgment regarding professional relationships was too poor to risk keeping her in a client-facing role. And Lance? Moved to California. Something about a fresh start and new opportunities. So Lance had gotten his authentic relationship documentation and moved on to new subjects, leaving Brielle to deal with the professional consequences of their artistic collaboration. The irony was perfect. She'd risked everything for someone who'd treated her exactly the way she'd treated me. I was promoted to regional procurement director 6 months later, with a salary increase that more than compensated for the legal fees from the divorce. I bought a smaller house closer to the hospital, with a home office where I could work without interruption and a kitchen where I could cook for one without feeling lonely. Vera retired and moved to Florida, but not before giving me a piece of advice that I've carried with me. Tyler, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a life so good that you forget why you needed revenge in the first place. She was right, mostly. I built a good life, found peace in routine and honesty, and learned to appreciate the quiet satisfaction of days without drama or deception. But I never forgot why I'd needed revenge. And I never regretted making sure Brielle understood that actions have consequences. 2 years after our divorce, I ran into Quinn at a coffee shop downtown. She looked older, less polished, like someone who'd learned that life was more complicated than Instagram made it appear. "Tyler, how are you doing?" "Very well, Quinn. How's Brielle?" "She's struggling. The divorce was really hard on her, and losing her job made everything worse. She's been trying to rebuild her career, but it's been difficult." I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. "I'm sorry to hear that. She asks about you sometimes. I think she regrets how everything ended." "I'm sure she regrets the consequences. I doubt she regrets the choices that led to them." Quinn looked uncomfortable, like someone who'd realized they were in the middle of a conversation they didn't understand. "Tyler, do you ever think about what might have happened if you'd handled things differently?" "Every day. If I'd handled things differently, I might still be married to someone who lied to me, cheated on me, and made me feel crazy for noticing. I'm grateful I handled things exactly the way I did." I left Quinn sitting in the coffee shop, probably composing a text to Brielle about our encounter. I drove home to my quiet house, made dinner for one, and spent the evening reading a book without interruption. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Tyler, this is Brielle. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I put you through. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations are finished, and some apologies come too late to matter. Brielle had wanted space, and I'd given her all the space she could handle. She'd wanted freedom from control, and I'd freed her from any obligation to consider my feelings about her choices. I'd also freed myself from any obligation to care about her regrets. The next morning, I woke up in my own house, in my own bed, with my own plans for the day. I made coffee without having to ask anyone else how they wanted it prepared. I read the news without commentary from someone who thought my interests were boring. I went to work without wondering what lies I'd discover when I came home. Brielle had been right about one thing. She'd needed space to grow, and in the space she'd created, I'd grown into someone who understood that the best relationships are built on honesty, respect, and mutual consideration. Someone who knew that love without trust is just emotional manipulation with better marketing. Someone who would never again confuse controlling behavior with caring, or mistake manipulation for passion, or accept blame for someone else's choices. I'd learned that the opposite of control isn't freedom, it's accountability. And accountability, it turned out, was exactly what Brielle had been trying to avoid when she'd accused me of suffocating her with my expectations of honesty and fidelity. She'd wanted to celebrate our anniversary with elaborate dinners and romantic gestures while secretly planning to leave me for someone else. She'd wanted the security